Amen. I agree with John. Sister Ramos does an excellent job in teaching the lesson. Israel had been in captivity for 400 years. During that time, they did not have the right or the privilege of exercising their free moral agency. Now that God had delivered them from out of depression, where they were no longer under the thumb of Pharaoh, having to do what he wanted them to do, and now was going to have an opportunity to exercise their free moral agency. God wanted them to have guidelines to help them exercise that right. So he's on Mount Sinai set the law to them by Moses to give them some guidelines for two reasons. Number one, that they might be able to stay in the land where he was sending them, and that things would go well with them while they were in the land. And now, in today's text, these Israelites who had been freed from Egypt had spent 40 years in the wilderness. And those who had received the instructions from Moses on the guidelines they should use in exercising their free moral agency, to know where the lines were, they had all died. So what God is doing now is doing what he's telling us we need to do. He's giving these instructions to the new generation. And what God has done, to keep there from being any confusion, he allowed the same man to give it, they gave it to their fathers to still be alive, to give it to them. Had he not done that, and somebody else was telling them what God said, they could have been subject to somebody saying, well, that's not what my daddy told me Moses said. So to eliminate that, God allowed Moses, the same one who taught their fathers, to teach them what the law and what the guidelines God had that they should know about as they exercise their free moral agency. And he told them that the one critical guideline that will help you to stay in the land and for things to go well with you is to recognize that there is but one God. In in Egypt, there were many gods. So I want you to know that there is one God, and that you are, if you want to stay in the land, and if you want things to go well with you, you are to love this God with all of your heart, your mind, your soul, spirit, strength, and everything. And if you do that, my Lord, then things will go well with you in the land. And you can stay in the land and things will go well with you. If you don't, I'm going to put you out of the land. Now, if you love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, and strength, you need to be aware that as you are being taught this, that it should not get lost in your generation, but it needs to be carried on for generation to generation that they will know. And that's what he was doing, teaching the new generation. And he said that the emphasis is that you need to know what the requirements are yourself before you can pass them on to somebody else. And the problem that we have today, so many of those of us who are charged with the responsibility to pass on to the next generation what God guidelines are, is we don't know them ourselves. That's why God said you need to have them as frontlets before your eyes. Not the eyes of your children, but your eyes. Put them on your hand so that you will know what they are. Because you can't pass on something that you do not know any more than you can go back to a place that you've never been. Then the second part of the lesson tells us that in order for this to happen, the critical institution that's going to enable this to happen is going to be the family. Now, what's happening to us in the formation of our families is many of us have never been told to the point where we understood that marriage was a forever thing. And that's why I don't want to marry anybody unless I give them counseling. And one of the chief things in counseling is for them to know that God is expecting this to be more than a ceremony, but the coming together of two persons to become one for as long as they both shall live. Now, I don't know about you, but most of us were not taught that when we got married. It was not taught in such a way that it took hold to our lives. We heard it, may have, but hearing it and understanding it are two different things. You ever read something time and time and time again, or heard it preached time and time again, and then all of a sudden something clicks? So the problem that we have in today's society is that we don't go into marriage understanding that it is to last as long as you both shall live. It's forever. We don't know that. We don't go into it with that in mind. We go into it, and if it works, good. If it doesn't, I can make it by myself. And they fixed it so now you don't even have to give a reason for divorce anymore. Just say, I want, call it no fault divorce. I want a divorce because I want one. But if we go into it, and that's why counseling needs to be more than just a day or two before the ceremony. Once you get engaged, before the marriage date is set, you need to go through this to understand at least that one thing, that this is designed by God to be forever. For better or worse, for good or bad, in sickness and in health, it's designed. And I generally tell them, just because things don't go well in the marriage doesn't mean that you should dissolve it, except for certain rare cases. It's just like there was a time my left knee hurt me so bad I couldn't walk, and when my granddaughter got married, I was doing the ceremony, and I couldn't hardly stand. I couldn't stay for the celebration. I had to go back and get in the van and stretch my leg out, what have you. As bad as it hurt, it never crossed my mind to cut it off. I'm sick of this knee hurting me. It never crossed my mind to cut it off, to get rid of it. And I tell them, just because things don't go well in marriage, consider it as your knee that's hurting. Don't let it into your mind that you're going to cut it off. What you do is do what I did, is you try to find a way with the help of somebody else to get it fixed so it can be useful again. If you know that going into marriage, you go into it with a different attitude. Then you go into it starry-eyed because I love. And I say, why do you want to get married? They say, because I love. I say, what does that mean? What does that mean? What do you mean by you love her? What do you mean by you love him? So proper counseling is important to understand what marriage is. And I tell them all the time, we spend hours and dollars on a wedding, which is going to last for just a few minutes, and don't spend any time or effort on preparing for the marriage, which is designed to last forever. So whatever time I have, I try to crowd as much into it as possible. But the main thing is God intended for this institution to be the one through which his word would pass to the next generation. And to do that, it needs to have the stability that God showed by allowing Moses to teach both generations, the same person. And that's why God used to allow people to live 800-900 years so they could pass on information, pass on information. And somebody said, this is what it is. They said, well, that's not what I heard. Well, we heard it from great-grandpa. He's still alive. He's up there at the house. Go and ask him. So God has left his word now to be the grandpa on the hill to teach us what it is. So they were coming out of slavery under the thumb of Pharaoh, not able to exercise their free moral agency. God was freeing them, but he wanted them to know where the guidelines were So as they exercise their free moral nature, the right to make their own decision, they will know where the guidelines are. And these guidelines need to be passed on to the next generation, and that is to be done through this institution that God created called marriage. And we need to understand that he intends for that institution to last for as long as you both shall live. And I harp on that hard. And sometimes I see a different expression in the faces of those I'm counseling. If you can't go into it with that in mind, you're not going to it. And then I tell them, as beautiful as she is, what if she can't even lift her finger? What are you going to do then? What if she can't caress you like you think you want? What are you going to do then? You're going to abandon her? Or are you going to stick with her because you've got an agape love toward her? It's a covenant, it's agreement, not a feeling. And if more marriages were entered into with this kind of understanding, and it should be over a period of time, because first time you come to talk with the pastor, they're so in love, they ain't hearing what you're saying. So you have to hit it more than one time. They need more than one session before it clicks. And some pastors have told me that in some cases when they counsel this way, they decide that they weren't really as much in love as they thought they were. Or they want to think about it before they get married. But if we do this, God has the plan. And if we follow his plan, and in passing it on, the best way to do it, as was mentioned today, is not just depend on them hearing you tell them, but to let them see you doing it. And that makes a big difference. And if you do that, then that kind of love that God showed to give us the guidelines and the way to pass it on, it will shape the next generation. God bless you. Now that just might be somebody here who have entered into this adventure, attending church, becoming a member, and working, have done it without understanding its true purpose. The true purpose is to have